Carol Grannon. I'm with Trinity Foundation, and I'm pleased today to introduce Dr. Eddie Thompson. Eddie is with us once a month and provides services for the foundation, and today he is going to talk to us about basic estate planning. So I hope you enjoy his presentation, and be sure to pepper him with lots of questions because he has lots of information for you. So, Eddie. I will say we've been working with Eddie for the last about 15 years. So you may have seen him around the hospital, and he is just old hat to us.
Well, that feels good.
Yeah.
Well, nothing more exciting than talking about estate planning while you're eating lunch or right after lunch, but I hope this is helpful. And the handouts have a great deal more detail than we're going to cover today, and that's intentional because we don't want to get too deep into the woods. And as I go along, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Okay? Everybody feel comfortable doing that? So estate planning really has four basic goals. The first is provide for surviving spouse if you're married. Second, to provide for heirs. Third, to reduce taxes. And then fourth, if you choose to do so, to give to charity. What most people don't know is that you can take money that normally is directed to the IRS and direct it to local charities. Most people would prefer, it's not that they love the IRS and they go, if I've got some of my money, I want to give it to the IRS. Not many volunteer to do that. But we'll talk a little bit about that because it's something you might want to keep in mind if you want to support the Cancer Society or the current Community Foundation or, for example, this hospital. So, how many in here have a will? Good. Good. How many would say their will is current? Very good. Actually, that's shocking to me. We find that most people, I had a gentleman come and see me a couple weeks ago, and he brought me his will on yellow paper. And I said, I've never seen a will on yellow paper until I realized it was written in 1948. And I asked him, has anything changed since 1948? He said, well, yeah, a few things. So you can have a will that is perfectly drafted and not be what you need. We want to talk about that. There may be reasons it's out of date. You may have lost a spouse. You may have had lost a child. It may have been written so long ago the tax laws have changed, and it's not unusual for tax laws to change, in case you didn't know that. In recent years, they've actually been positive changes that are actually better for most people. It may exclude a child or a needy relative. One of the other things we find is that very often, especially young folks who have small children, their wills are not detailed enough. And part of the planning process, if you have small children or children who are not quite majority, is that you need to have a plan that addresses every single year of their life. Do you have enough money set aside to take care of a guardian, for example? Would a guardian have to get another car? Would they have to add to their house? Will the guardian have enough resources to provide additional food for your children? And what happens when they get to middle school and all these activities? Is that taken into consideration? When they get into high school, when they get to 16, do you want to help buy a car? When they go to college? We find that especially young families, I'm glad there's some young folks in here, that the truth is they've not really thought through what is needed to take care of their children. It's really important that you do that. You need really specific plans to accomplish that. The other thing that's really surprising to me is that very often not all the documents are signed or executed. So we're going to see in just a few minutes, good estate planning includes more typically than a will. And we'll talk just a little bit about that. So you can have a perfectly drafted will but not be what is best and most appropriate for you. The other thing too is that very often we give very little thought to the estate planning process. We go sit down with our attorney. The attorney says, what do you want to accomplish? And if it's a couple, you look at each other and go, I don't know, what do you want to do? And they may say, I don't know, what do you want to do? And the truth is, what is the attorney doing while you're pondering? Making money. And there's nothing wrong with that because you're paying them for what? Two things, time and knowledge. And so while you're pondering, trying to figure out what to do, their responsibility is to charge you. And so what you need to do is go in as a consumer saying, this is what I want to do. Can I do it? How do I do it? So the best plan is your plan. It's one that you have. It accomplishes your goals, your objectives, and it's very important that you're very specific in what you're trying to accomplish in your estate plan. So the best plan may not be to get the very most amount of money to your heirs as quickly as possible. So what are some scenarios when you would not want to get too much money to your heirs too quickly?
They're young.
They're very young. They can't get it, can they? If they're still minors, they can't get all these resources. Excellent. What else? Can you think of another reason you would not want to get too much money to your heirs too quickly?
Taxes.
Accidents?
Taxes.
Taxes. Yep. What else? Could it be that you have a child or grandchild with an addiction? Could you be worried about an evil son-in-law? Because in most states, if you inherit something and you go through a divorce, can you lose some of that money? What if one of your children has a car accident and found liable, especially if they've inherited wealth? Can they lose that money? So what we want to do is put together the smartest plan for each of your heirs after we've taken care of each other. Does that make sense? So you go in the room to meet with your attorney or other advisors as a consumer. This is what we want to accomplish. And we want to be smart about it. When my parents' generation drafted their wills, they gave everything to the heirs equal as fast as possible. That has changed dramatically in my 39 years of doing this. It's changed dramatically. Yes?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You're going back and forth between estate and will. Are they the same thing?
A will manages the estate when someone passes away. But we're going to cover some more information on that in just a minute. Okay? Because there are some alternatives to that. So what are some of the perils and pitfalls of putting together your estate? The biggest one we see is procrastination. I'm going to do it. How many of you have ever seen a round to it? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, my dad used to give those out all the time. We're going to get around to it. We're going to do it someday. It's easy to postpone this because we don't like the expense and we don't really like the idea of doing these type of plans, do we? What are the chances you're not going to live forever? What are the chances that you may not know the day you're going to die? And what happens if you've not planned thoughtfully and thoroughly for your family?
The state takes control.
That's exactly right. Do you want a judge deciding who's going to get your children, how much they're going to get? I'm right now serving as a trustee of a trust of a young lady who's about to turn 18. She has a drug addiction. She's going to inherit $285,000 the day she turns 18. Is that a good thing? Will that help her? So procrastination is the biggest thing. The second is a lack of coordination. And that doesn't mean you're clumsy. We'll cover that in just a few minutes, what that means. And this is another one that's really challenging, is keeping your plan current. It just gets away from us, doesn't it? We tend not just to procrastinate, but we say we're going to do something, we get it done, and then we don't look at it. I'm amazed at how many people have had wills drafted years ago that have never been reviewed. They don't know what's in them. And what's the problem of your trying to read a will?
The language of a lawyer.
And so why do you think they have that language in there? Why is it so complicated?
So we can't read it?
No.
We have to pay them?
Do you have to pay them?
Yeah.
No, it's almost always because of somebody did something wrong and there was litigation. So they're trying to protect you. The challenge is it's very difficult to pick up a will or a trust and read it and know what's in it. So one of the services we provide is we'll go through your documents with you, make sure you know what you have, if you ever have a question on that. And then the last one is poor communications, where maybe if it's a couple, they haven't talked thoroughly with each other. It may be that we're not real accurate in what we're telling our attorney. We find a substantial error rate in documents, not because the attorney's not a good attorney, it's because they didn't know what you were trying to accomplish. So, now there's some technical ways to minimize federal tax. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but the marital deduction, the charitable deduction, lifetime transfers, which is actually, that's a higher number than that today, and trust to avoid double estate tax. So how do you select an attorney? This is really important. And I want to spend a few minutes covering this, and then I want to see what kind of questions you have. I would ask an attorney, how many estates have you planned that's my or our size? Why do you think that's important?
Experience.
Pardon me?
Experience.
Experience. The second question I would ask is, how many estates have you planned with our type of assets? Anybody own farmland? Anybody own timberland? Timberland is treated very differently in the tax code than farmland, crop farmland. Did you know that? Huge difference tax-wise. And so I want to know, if I'm having someone plan my estate, that they have worked with my type of assets. Because in Iowa, for example, how many people leave a farm to an heir who is not farming that property, but is leasing it or renting it or whatever it may be? Maybe they live in Chicago, they might live in Minneapolis, Kansas City, Omaha, Des Moines, and they're not on the farm, but maybe that farm is being farmed by a sibling. Just a lot of things to think about. You need someone who has expertise in these areas. And then I would ask, how much do you charge? Do you charge hourly or do you charge a flat rate? In Iowa, there's a statutory fee for an attorney. They get so much based upon the size of the estate, which is very unique. You don't see that in other states. I would also ask, how many hours will it take to put our plan together? I want to know if they have some expertise. If they say it's really short, I might think about it. If they say it's going to take forever, I'd think about that too. So are you paying them to do research on your estate? Are they learning on your dime? Are they so seasoned and experienced they know exactly what to do? Now I want to pause and say, you have excellent attorneys in Fort Dodge. You have excellent, very bright, very knowledgeable, extremely capable. And I'm telling you, that's rare. I don't know how you've gotten them. I don't know how you keep them, but you got them. And you need to take advantage of them in a positive sense. And then what documents will you provide? Are they only going to do a will? Are they going to do a trust? Are they going to do the advanced directives? What documents will you produce for this dollar amount? And then, how many weeks will it take to complete the process? The one thing I will say about Iowa is that attorneys, by and large, are not in a hurry. It takes them a while to produce documents. And I don't know what that's about. Maybe it's just a nice slow pace or whatever. But if you're there and you're meeting with them and you want some documents drafted, I want to know how long it's going to take. And I would suggest maybe 2 to 3 weeks would be typical, because it's that important. And then you need to ask them, are you open to our input and desires? Now, that may seem like a strange question, but it's not. And so we'll talk about how do you accomplish that in a little bit later. Okay? Any questions so far on these? Do they make sense? Practical? Okay. Common mistakes in estate planning. Well, there's a bunch of them. Gifting assets away without professional advice. We see this all of the time in the Midwest. A very wonderful couple who own a farm put a child or children as owners of that farm. Is there a problem with that? What would be the problem?
They have no experience farming.
May have no experience farming, so a practical issue. Do you think there are any tax considerations? How much can I give away before I have to start paying gift tax? Anybody know?
12,000?
14. So let's say I have a piece of property worth $100,000. And I put my son as co-owner, right? Have I made a gift to my son? Yes. If I make him co-owner, I've made a gift to him. And if that property is worth $14,000 or more, do I have a tax liability? Yes. And what the tax rate is 40%. So a $100,000 gift could cost you how much? $140,000. See the issue? You've got to have good counsel. Do not give anything of value away without getting counsel. Now, what you can do, you can file a gift tax return, and you won't have the tax because you're going to take some of your credit. It's a shortened version. My point is, if you go to an advisor who knows what they're doing, they can help you avoid tax. Okay? Single biggest issue we see in Iowa. Does that make sense? They may give farm equipment away. They may give a tractor or a combine or give them cattle. I mean, there's a lot of things we can give away, some of the harvest. It's just got to be very, very thoughtfully done. Big issue in Iowa. Mistitling assets. A way of looking at that is I have a retirement account and I put my children on my retirement account as co-owners, not beneficiaries. Anybody in here named Catherine? Oh, Chat, okay. Mistitling assets, big issue, and one we see frequently with people throughout the United States is not having enough cash on the hand when someone passes away. So why would that be a problem?
It takes a while to get.
Pardon me?
Can't access the money.
Okay, what'd you say?
Can't access the money, right?
Can't access the money? You
That's
said,
pretty much what I was.
yeah. And if the probate process, how long it takes to take someone's name off an asset and put someone else's name on it, can take anywhere from 9 to 18 months. So what if there are expenses coming in during that period? What do? Or what if you do have a tax liability? When does the IRS want their money? Within 9 months of death. So my point on this is that you need to make sure you have enough cash on hand, especially you young people who have children. It's really important. That's why life insurance has such value. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. So not enough cash on hand, contracts and wills not in agreement. So this, I wish I had a board to draw on. I should have done that. That's my fault. But let me try to explain this. That's okay. That's okay. It's not worth it. Let me explain. This is really important. So write some of these things down as I tell you. The purpose of probate and a will is to change someone's name off of a title and put someone else's name on it. That's the purpose of probate. Let me restate it. So the purpose of probate is to remove Eddie Thompson's name off of an asset and put Rob's or Barrett's or Jessa's name on there in my place. Okay? That's its purpose. So before that can be done, what must be done first? Got to make sure there's no debt on it, or if the debt is there, to be arranged, right? So that's why you'll see public notices in the newspaper or maybe on the radio, someone has died. If you have a claim against the estate, contact this person as executor or the courts. There's another way for assets to pass outside of probate and bypassing a will, getting to your point, and that is a contract. A contract where successive beneficiaries are named bypasses probate and typically takes 3 to 5 weeks to finalize. So one way of giving through your will might take 9 months to 18 months. If it's under a contract, it'll take 3 to 5 weeks. Now assume you have small children. How many have small children here? Okay. Would your guardians need some cash if something were to happen to you? If they could get access to your retirement accounts in 3 to 5 weeks, would that be helpful? If they could get to your checking account or savings account within 3 to 5 weeks, would that be helpful? So most of us, what we want to do is to move as much as we can over to contracts rather than going through our will and probate. So here are things that are contracts that flow within 3 to 5 weeks. Retirement accounts, life insurance, revocable living trusts. It can be deeds. It can be POD accounts, which checking accounts. The truth is most of your assets are under contract, right? And so that money gets to heirs very quickly, and all they've got to do is show a death certificate to make sure those assets are transferred if there's been successive planning for who takes the place.
So then, is it wrong to list your beneficiary of your 401k as your trust?
As your child, no.
As your trust?
No, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Does that make it longer for them to tap
No,
into?
because both are contracts.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So trust is the contract?
Yes, trust is a contract. Revocable living trust, inter vivos, testamentary, all trusts are contracts. So I'm glad you asked that question. So what is a trust? Trusts are not what everybody thinks. They're not this massive, difficult thing to deal with. A trust is nothing more than a contractual agreement between two parties. That's all it is. So I could create a trust, be the trustee, and the trust beneficiary. So a trust is nothing more than a contractual agreement. So I'm glad you asked that question. It's a good question. Okay? Now, if there is a conflict between, let's say, a trust and a will, which one are going to be followed? What would you think? Who said will? Okay. Who thinks maybe a trust? Contract always precedes the will. Always. So if I have listed on my retirement accounts my heirs, and I have also in my will where I exclude my children as heirs, they'd be disappointed in that, I bet. Which of those two are going to be followed? No. Because contracts, wills have no control over contracts where successive beneficiaries are named. So I can all day long say that I'm going to give everything to my favorite charity out of my retirement accounts, but I say in my will I want everything to go to my kids, which is going to be followed? Okay? Contracts always supersede a will. So can you see why it's important that these two be aligned? To make sure they agree? Because you'll probably want to reference, if I'm doing something in a contract, I'd probably want to reference it in my will too. Okay? Now, which of these two do you think is easier to change, your will or a contract? Yeah. Because all I got to do is call up my IRA administrator and say, change this, right? I'd want confirmation of that, but it's pretty easy. Okay. Does that make sense so far? That is a really fundamental principle. The vast majority of people don't know, and a lot of business owners don't know, and sometimes attorneys don't know if they don't deal with this every day. That's why you need an estate planning attorney. Yes?
Okay, so I have a question. Mm-hmm. So if you list your trustee of your trust for your child's guardian that you have designated in your will so that they have access to the money, when does it then turn over to the kids?
Well, it depends
They
on...
always essentially have
No.
control over it.
Will the children have control over it? It depends on their age. If they're minors, they have no control over it. Am I answering your question?
Well, I'm just thinking, so...
Give me an example.
Okay, so my daughter is 17 months.
Okay.
So obviously we put guardians in place.
Right.
We set them up as our trustees for a trust.
Okay.
So that they could access our accounts if need be.
Yeah.
And start getting money to help provide for her.
Yep.
Now, when she turns 18, does she become trustee of the account?
It depends on if you give her the ability to have trust powers.
Okay.
So again, it goes back to that document. What does that document say? Because a trust agreement is nothing more than a contractual agreement between the person who creates the trust and the person who manages it, called the trustee. The other thing I would say, make sure that all your documents align up with that. Because again, we see that as a mistake very often. Okay? Does all that make sense so far? Is this making sense? Okay. One of the other challenges we see is people paying too much for their estate plan. But the one that's equally as bad is paying too little. I'm amazed at how much money we want to save on our estate plan. How many have heard of LegalZoom or some of these other programs? I'm not supposed to tell you what I think. I would go to an estate planning attorney. They know what questions you need to answer. Okay? And that's just a practical suggestion. Okay. So far, we're all in agreement. This all makes sense so far. Okay? All right, we'll go on to the next slide. What should you do? So I thought about we'd have a mixture of people in here, which we do. I'm glad of that. So I want to tell you what I would do. Anybody in their 20s? Okay. Anybody remember your 20s? You know, I got boots older than them. That's the frightening part about this. Well, if I was in my 20s, I would want life insurance and disability insurance. And term, when you're in your 20s, is incredibly cheap. You need enough. Now, there's only one other man in here, so I'm going to say this. We're not as valuable as our wives financially. And I want to prove that. I have a magic closet. When I show up, I've got freshly laundered clothes in there. I have a magic refrigerator. When I get home, there are groceries in the refrigerator. They just appear. There's canned vegetables. There's stuff in the freezer. Cheryl does a lot of things I don't do. I travel about 18, 20 days a month. I show up, and guess what? Everything's in order. When our kids were young, guess who drove them around the most? What would it cost, you young mothers, what would it cost to replace you annually? Not your income. All of your activities, all the services. You ever thought about that? I'm going to tell you what I think it is. I think it's about $80,000 a year. Would you agree with that, Amy?
I would agree with, if not more.
If not more. And that's if you're cheap. Now, if you had to be replaced, someone would be paid to do it most likely. So your life insurance should be enough to produce that amount of income, not counting your salary and fringe benefits. So if I were in my 20s, if I was a young lady in my 20s and I had 2 or 3 children, I'd want $400,000 or $500,000 in life insurance at a minimum. I'd feel safer with $750, and it's cheap. Get it for 20 years, and then it's gone. Because what are you insuring? It's not a savings account for your children. What is it? It's right. Security blanket for your children. Life insurance when you're young is really important, but so is disability. Are you more likely to be disabled or die at your age? Disabled. Make sure you have enough disability insurance too. You need a basic will and other related documents. Now, I really want to spend some time with this for these younger folks with children. I hope you'll take us up and let me sit down and help you plan for your children. Do this all the time. We want to make sure your children are taken care of. And we'll talk about specifically how much money every year do you need to make sure is set aside to take care of each child when they get to various levels of life. You're going to be shocked how expensive they are right now. We want to really think that one through. So you want a basic will and related documents, and you want your basic will, even if you don't have a trust, to make sure it covers all the bases in this area right here. Okay, 30s and 40s. Surely we have somebody in the 30s and 40s in here. Okay. What should you be doing? Well, you need life insurance, most likely, and health care insurance, obviously. You need a will and related documents. You need to start funding, if you haven't already, retirement accounts. In your 50s, you need a will, insurance, retirement accounts, looking for long-term care insurance. Anybody have long-term care insurance? Is that offered through the hospital? Okay. And then if you're 60 and older, for those of us who are 60 and older, we need a will, of course, maybe a trust, life insurance, maybe, retirement accounts, long-term care insurance, pre-retirement planning. If you're after retirement, which I assume nobody in here is, then you need to update your estate plan. Okay? So you have that in front of you that you can use at your leisure. Now, here's a naughty question. I've got 3, I say kids, they're not kids. I have 3 children. I love my children. I love being with them. They're 40, 37, and 32. I am so proud of them. They're responsible, hardworking, they have integrity. I am really proud of them. And the question for me is, how much should I give them out of my estate and when? The when is more important than the how much. The how much is kind of set. But when should I give it to them? That's a really difficult question. Because again, they might get a divorce. And I don't want the evil son-in-law to get some of Jess's estate. By the way, my son-in-law is not evil, but might be worth. No. But if I'm going to give to Jessa, I want Jessa taken care of, and I want Lily taken care of, my granddaughter. Actually, I want Lily taken care of more than Jessa, to be honest with you. Love that granddaughter. And so the question becomes, when should they get this inheritance? And maybe they need to get it over a period of time. Maybe what I could do is give them a source of income, maybe so much a year, and then when they reach 35, a certain amount of money, when they reach 40, a certain amount of money, when they reach 50, whatever it may be, giving them escalating lump sums. Because what tends to happen to us with financial maturity as we get older?
Smarter.
What's that?
We get a little smarter.
Yeah, we learn a few lessons, don't we? Start learning a few lessons. We don't tend to blow as much as we blow when we're younger. That's exactly right. And so maybe I want to kind of set some money out aside, and I want my children to experience consequences for their actions. I do not believe my job is to rescue them for financial mistakes. I see a lot of parents who are taking care of their kids when they're 40, 50, 60. That's not healthy. There needs to be a time when our children learn consequences. If you make a bad financial decision, you made a bad financial decision, work your way out of it. That's how we learned, right? And the reality, most of us were not taught by our parents to be good financial managers. Would you agree with that? They may have taught us to save, but maybe not how to invest. And it's really important that we don't save our children from bad behavior, no matter if they're 3 years old, 10 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old. I'm done preaching. But I really believe that. I have been amazed at trust babies in my 39 years of doing this, where we set money aside. I remember my sons, I've always made our sons work, and they ran a fireworks tent every summer. They made a fortune. And I remember one night I went up sitting down there with them, and a lady pulled in a brand new Camaro, and she bought $900 worth of fireworks. And she looked at her boyfriend and said, "It's all gone now." So I said, "What's all gone?" She goes, "My inheritance from my aunt. I got a new car and all those fireworks." And I said, "Is it all gone?" She goes, "Yep." She'd had the money less than 24 hours. 93% of inheritance is spent in 6 months. Is that not amazing? So, and I will tell you, you don't know what your children will do. I hear people all the time, "Oh, my kids will never do that." Be careful what you say. I want my children to have 2 eyes. I want them to have integrity, and I want them to have initiative. Yes, ma'am?
I have a question. So how do you plan for that? Because you don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to act. If they're going to have addictions, things like that. How often should you update these things? I mean,
Often. I would say within every 2 years. And but with children, you really need a long-term plan, 30 or 40 years.
probably more conservative about it.
Cautious. Be real cautious. Does that answer your question? Okay. So I want my children to have integrity, and I want them to have initiative. Warren Buffett said, I want to leave my children enough and not too much. Remember what he said about that? I want to leave them enough that they can take care of the basics, but not too much as to spoil them. We did an estate recently of $1.6 billion. That's a lot of money. And the guy told us, I don't want to spoil my children. I'm going to limit how much I give them. So he's only given each of them $50 million. Now, they were boo-hooing. But I think I tried to get my name in on that document. It didn't go real well. But it's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. Okay, so what are the primary goals for our heirs in planning for them? We're going to leave money to our heirs. This is where the rubber meets the road for us, especially those of us who are older. What do we hope to accomplish in leaving our children an inheritance? What's your goal? What's the objective? And here's what I've learned over the years of doing this, done hundreds, thousands of estates, seen a lot of them probated. This takes thought. And each child may be different. I've discovered that being fair is not always equal, and being equal is not always fair. So what's your goal in leaving your children an inheritance? So what do you think some of the goals are?
Security.
What's that?
Security.
Number one, security. Okay? What else?
Education for my grandchild.
Education for grandchildren. Why is that? Because we believe education is moving us forward, right? Really will help them. What else? It's about it, isn't it? When you think about it. Secure them. Make sure they're not broke. And education maybe help start a business, but it's in helping them take the next step, right? Isn't that what education is? Helping that child take the next step. The challenge with younger children, we don't know what they're going to be, right? We have no idea. So the most important thing is, go back to her comment, is to secure them. But we also want to try to look in the forward and see what we could do to help them advance. Okay? So, before we go any further, I want you to think about what are your estate planning goals for your heirs. I want you to think about that. And I'll tell you what mine are for my children. I've told my sons and Jessa, I've given them a good education. I've taught them to work really hard. I've taught them to invest. Don't borrow money unless the asset appreciates. Hire a plumber, get an electrician, don't try to do everything yourself. And to manage what they make. Very few of us have been taught how to manage money. That's one of our responsibilities. Most of us haven't done it. Or if we've done it, it's not been a good job. And so they continue to make mistakes, right? We want to help avoid that. So what are your goals? Think about what are your goals in your estate plan. We want to help our children become better people. Would you agree with that? We want to help them to be better. When this young lady gets that $285,000, I know what her parents were wanting to do, because they wrote their plan when she was really young. They didn't take in consideration she might be having struggles when she turns 18. Giving her that money will not make her better. Would you agree with that? In fact, it scares me. It may destroy her. This takes long-term thinking, and you don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. All right. How do you transfer your values? I think for most of us, if we could give our children anything of value, it would be what we believe, what we know to be true. Would you agree with that? So whatever estate plan you're putting together has to take in consideration your values. Because I will tell you something, giving your children money will not improve their values. It will not change their character. Right? Would you agree with that? And then that last here, we want individuals to have learning time. That's why we don't give children 10 a couple $100 a week, right? If we had it, right? And that's why we don't rescue, again, our children from financial mistakes. They've got to learn. And so how do we learn not to touch a hot stove?
Touch it.
You can tell them, right? You can tell them until what happens? Or don't you climb? You're going to fall if you climb up there. Bam. Oh. Right? You know, it's funny to see different people. Some people rush up and say, oh, let me kiss the boo-boo, and the others say, now you're better off because you've learned a lesson. It's kind of interesting how that works. So we want children to have learning time, and it doesn't matter their age. We want to make sure that over a period of time they learn how to use these resources. Okay, so some individuals want to give heirs time to learn and how to handle an inheritance. So I want to give you several things to think about in your own estate plan. One of the ways to learn, and this is really smart, one of the ways to learn how your children are going to manage money is to give them a little bit now. Doesn't have to be a lot. I'm talking about adult children. Give them a little bit, yeah. Give them a little bit of money and just see what they do with it. They will reveal themselves. I promise you, they will reveal themselves. Number 2, estate principal. How much blob of money do you want to give them at one time that they can go spend? Okay? So if you give a child a lifetime gift and they start saving it, what does that tell you? If they spend it like that, what does that tell you? And I promise you, the size of the money doesn't matter. And then, if you find out, wow, they really are managing money, and maybe that's because you've given them a little bit of information, you've had a conversation with them, and now you give them a large blob of money that you have confidence they're going to invest that money because it now is a blanket for security. We love that idea, don't we? We want to pass on something that gives them security, gives them protection. And then you might, over a period of time, in addition to when you're gone, giving them a principal to provide some income for them over time too. We've already kind of mentioned that. And then deferred principal, when they get to a certain age, they get a large block of money. The biggest concern most parents my age have is, will my child be able to retire? I don't know about the rest of you, but why do you think we're concerned about our children being able to retire?
Social Security will be gone.
We think Social Security is going to be gone, and we worry about it too, right? Do we have enough to live on the rest of our lives? I'm 64. I think I do. Sean and I have been very frugal, bought a lot of real estate, pretty good income from the real estate, but what if the real estate market collapsed? What will we do? Just don't know. We don't have that security. So sometimes we want to give our children a lump sum when they reach a certain age, as I've already mentioned. Okay, so you can go back with this information and you can start putting in here dollar amounts to help you plan for your heirs. All right, now we're going to real quickly cover taxes. They're no fun, in case you haven't noticed that yet. But we have income tax. So before I go much further, what is a tax? What's the purpose of taxes?
Can't say that in public.
Okay. All right. If you read, I don't know if it's still true. It used to be that I haven't looked at it in years, but it used to begin, the first of the tax code said the purpose of taxation in the United States of America is to redistribute wealth.
Okay.
So what that means is I earn an income, and I owe some of that money back to society, almost always collected in the form of a tax. The other option is to give it to charity, because that satisfies social capital too. Did you know that? That's why you get a deduction, some other things that happen. So that's the purpose of taxation. Now, you can have capital gains tax. So what is capital gains tax? Anybody know?
It's a tax you pay for selling something?
Yeah. So I buy a piece of property and I keep it for more than 12 months and I sell it. I have to pay a tax on the difference between what I paid for and what I sold it for. Okay? Called capital gains tax or unrealized income tax. And then gift tax. If I give too much away during the year, can I pay a tax on that gift? Yes. So if right now you can give $14,000 away to, in fact, I could give $14,000 to every one of you and not pay a single dime in gift tax on that gift. Don't hold your breath. If I were to give you $15,000 to each of you, would I owe a tax on any of that money? I'd owe a tax on how much? $1,000. That's exactly right. Okay? So there is a gift tax. And that's where a lot of people get in trouble because they give too much away without filing a gift tax return. There's generation. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of a time frame is that? Is that per year?
Per year. Now, this is getting way too technical.
Well, I thought that, so you can give $14,000 to your kid one year and then the next year you
Yes.
can do it again?
You
I
can-
thought it was just a one-time.
No, you can do it December 31, 14,000, and January the 1st.
Isn't there also a one-time gift though? Or is that the same?
Oh, you're ahead of me.
Oh, sorry.
Okay? That's where I was going next. So this is technical, but each of you have about $5 million you can give away without paying gift tax if you file a gift tax return. So I'm available. If you want to give that $5 million away, I'm happy to take it. Now, but my point is you've got to file a gift tax return. Anything under $14,000 in a year, you don't have to. Does that make sense if I go any further?
So, can you give an example? Say you go to give your kid $50,000, as an example. If you file a gift tax return, you file it or the kid has to?
You file it.
I file it. What, then
There's no tax on it because you're using some of your $4,950,000 of credit.
So if you give it June 1st, you're filing it then next year in March or April?
Yeah, you're filing for the current year.
Yeah.
Is
but-
that cash only, or does it
No,
include?
any asset. You can give them part of a farm. You can give them some of your stock as long as the value is under $14,000 or $14,000 or less.
Oh, I thought you meant this, not big one.
Oh, the big one, it could be anything you want to give them, farmland, whatever it is. But you got to file a gift tax return if it's over $14,000 in a current year. Per person. Now, the gift tax return is an aggregate. You're only allowed to give $4,950,000 away to everybody other than a charity. Okay? My point on that is don't do anything like that unless you talk to your accountant. But if you've got, now, boy, that's going to get too technical. Just by and large, don't give a lot away over $14,000 unless you talk to your accountant. That'll save everybody time. And that will only confuse things. There's also inheritance tax. You know, it's really interesting in Iowa. Iowa has an inheritance tax if you go horizontally. So let's say I give to my nieces and nephews. They would have to pay an inheritance tax, or my state would pay an inheritance tax to them. If I go up to my parents or down to my children, grandchildren, there's no inheritance tax.
Say that again.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? So let's say I want to leave out of my estate $50,000 to each niece and nephew. There's an inheritance tax on those gifts. If I give $50,000 to my parents, my grandparents, or to my children, my grandchildren, there's no inheritance tax. As long as you go up and down, no inheritance tax. You start going horizontally, there is. And I think it starts at, isn't that like 5,000? Anybody remember? I think it's 5,000 at 9% or something.
Does that count great-grandkids too?
Yep, up and down. As long as they're up and down.
What about sisters and brothers? That'd be across the board, you know, that'd be
I didn't hear what you said.
sisters and brothers, was that?
Sisters and brothers is horizontal. There's a tax. Yeah. Yep, there's a tax. Okay, and then there's federal estate tax, which doesn't start per individual until $4,950,000 this year. Yeah. Now, so I want to talk about how taxes are considered when you talk about estate. You have the probatable estate, which we've already learned means what? If it's a probatable estate, what does that mean? It's something that's managed by what document? My will.
Your will.
Yeah. And then you have what's called your total gross estate, which includes what's managed by your will or anything that's under a contract. Life insurance, jointly owned property, revocable trusts, retirement accounts. Which do you think the IRS likes? They like the big numbers, right? So all of these assets, any asset you own is subject to estate tax. Again, we all have $4,950,000 credit at the federal level. Now what's happening is more and more states are creating estate tax. Well, this is getting into it too much too, because they used to get money from the federal government when they collected estate tax. So maybe you forget that part of it. Okay? So this is what you feel like you own. This is what the county assessor thinks you own. This is what the IRS and Heirs think you own. You know, anybody know where that is? Don Chazar down in St. Pete. And this is how you feel. You know, it is amazing. We all, at some level, worry about money, don't we? It is amazing. I'm amazed at how many really wealthy people I've worked with who worry about money. Why do you think that is? How does it make us feel?
Secure.
What?
Secure.
Secure or insecure, one or the other, doesn't it? And most of us are always worried about money. I don't know a lot. I know that's true for most of us. I'm amazed at people who are wealthy who are still clipping coupons because they feel poor. And so, one of the things we have to do is to realize our situation. Now, I want to go over this next part very, very fast, but this is very important. What are some foundational documents you need to have in place? You need a power of attorney for health. Now, anybody have a child who's in college or going to college soon? Anybody? Did you know this is something most people overlook, that even if your child is on your health insurance and they're 18 or older to 26, if they're in a car accident and you show up at the hospital, can the hospital share with you information unless they put you on the HIPAA form? No. Isn't that something? And we work in healthcare, right? It's amazing how many people, when a child is sick, they show up at the hospital, their child's in college, and they go up and say, what's going on? And doctors are becoming hospitals become more reluctant, right? Because of HIPAA. And they say, sorry, we can't tell you. And they go, yeah, but this child is on my insurance. And what does the hospital or doctor say? It doesn't matter. So if your child's going off to college, make sure you're on that HIPAA form. Make sure. It's really important. And then you need it. So you need a healthcare power of attorney, power of attorney for property, and a living will. Basic documents. When I mentioned earlier, you need to ask your attorney, what documents will you prepare? These are some of the basic fundamental documents. Doesn't matter your age. Young people get sick too. I'm going to flip past these. You'll have a chance to look at them later. Second thing I would say is that everybody needs a will, a last will and testament, even if you have a trust. Okay? Basic document, you need to have it, no matter what.
Why is that? If you have a trust, why?
Because you're going to leave something out of your trust. It's going to happen. It's going to be a car, it's going to be a lawnmower, it's going to be something that has to be rolled over into that trust called a pour-over will. Okay? So it's a very simple document. If I've left anything out, it goes into my trust. Okay? You may need a revocable living trust. And let me tell you when this is needed. If you have a timeshare on which you pay property down at Branson, Missouri, and you die, your estate's going to be probated in Missouri and in Iowa. Your estate's probated wherever you have real estate. So you put your real estate, if it's out of state, in a revocable living trust, because we've already learned a contract means you bypass what process? Probate. Okay? Makes sense? You don't want to probate in Iowa and in Missouri. And this is, I wanted to take a moment just to describe a trust. This is the best illustration I've ever seen of a trust. So here you have a grantor or a trustor who's dumping assets into this big old machine called a trust, which is nothing more than a contractual agreement. This process is managed by a trustee. A trust always has two types of beneficiaries. Has a remainder beneficiary, see the cobwebs? They'll wait until the trust is terminated when they'll get everything, or you have an income beneficiary. I can be the grantor trustor, I can be the trustee, I can be the remainder or the income beneficiary. A good example, my property down in Branson, I just mentioned. Let's say I have property in Branson. I can create a revocable living trust to manage that property, and I can make all the decisions. I can sell it, I can get the remainder income, I can get income off of it if I rent it. A trust is nothing more than a contractual agreement. It's all it is. If you own property outside of the state of Iowa, you need one of these. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay? Doesn't limit you in any way. It just avoids probate if something were to happen to you. I'm going to let you look at this, but my point in this, if you set up a trust, make sure you fund it. Put something in there, or it does you no good. We see all the time people create trusts and there's nothing in there. They've just wasted their money. Okay? The next thing you need to make sure, if you are a married couple, that you need to have A/B planning. All that means is that both of you need to be able to take advantage of the $4,950,000. You need to ask for that, because that may go down someday. Who knows? I think the government needs money. It would not surprise me if they increase taxes in the future. I won't be shocked. Okay, and then next, if you have life insurance, can life insurance be taxed? Yes. So if you have life insurance, you want it in what's called an ILIT, Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, and there's some documentation on that. All right, now we're getting near the end. Advanced non-charitable tools. The easiest way to say this, if you've got a complicated estate, go see an attorney. That will save you some time reading this. And then the other thing I want to mention, and this may sound like it's an advertisement for Carol and the foundation, but I want you to listen to this. If you're getting near age 65 or 70, pause and look at a charitable gift annuity. Okay? If you're older than 65, you definitely need to look at it. It's one of the best ways to increase your income and get real tax advantages. And Carol can arrange that for you. She can probably show it to you. She's such a professional back there. My point is, tax laws were written in such a way as to incentivize gifts to charity. There are occasions when you can get more money through heirs by using a charitable trust than not. There are ways to increase your income, especially if you're single or over 65, to dramatically increase your income, reduce your taxes. You ought to look at it. You may not do it. You may say it's not for me. You ought to look at it. Okay. So, tools to accomplish your goals. Here are some things that you need to look at and talk to your attorney about. Do I need the following things? Do I need a will? Do I need a qualified personal residence trust? Where you often see this is where you have something of value, real estate of value, you want to leave to your heirs. A lake house, a homestead. You ought at least pause and look and see if you need a qualified personal residence trust. A qualified terminal interest trust. It's called a Q-tip. This is where, a good example of this, if I were to go first and Cheryl were to remarry, I'm sure he'd be an outstanding man. I wouldn't want him to have my vote, but everything else I really don't care about all that much. But I would not want him to take the assets Cheryl and I have accumulated and give it to his children. I would not want the assets we've accumulated, if something were to happen to Cheryl, she would get Alzheimer's or some form of dementia or have a stroke. I would not want him to control the future of those assets. I can give you example after example where that happened and it turned out bad. And this may be a man of great honor, but he may not understand business. Doesn't mean he has to be bad to make mistakes. And so If you've developed assets as a couple, you may want to preserve the right on how those assets are used to make sure they go to your children and not somebody else's. Okay? Charitable remainder trust, if you have a highly appreciated asset, that would make a lot of sense. Charitable lead trust, you'd have to be really wealthy for that, makes a lot of sense. Credit shelter trust is where I preserve assets for my heirs. These are things you need to ask your attorney, do I need these? The one exception, if you're getting in 65 and older, look at a charitable gift annuity. Carol can arrange that for you. Okay? Crummy trust is a life insurance trust that you'll need to talk to your attorney about as well. Okay, so last thing I want to show you, and then we'll be done. Before you go see your attorney, list your objectives. So if you're married, what's the first objective?
Provide for your spouse.
Yep. If you're single, what's the first objective? Take care of yourself. And the second would be what? Take care of my children, if you have children, and to then reduce taxes and maybe leave a portion of your estate to charity. Go in with your objectives and then ask the question, do I need the instruments we just saw on the preceding slide? Okay? So I know I ran a little bit long. What questions? Anybody have questions you want to ask real quick? What's the number? Okay, yes ma'am. Okay.
We're talking about the kids and getting a lump sum divided by or over years.
Mm-hmm.
Are they taxed on this money that they get, or is?
It depends on the type of asset and what happens from the time you set the money up until they get it.
And then,
Let me give you a quick example. If I leave my children a retirement account, do they have an income tax liability? Yes. Okay? If I leave them a piece of land and I die, they get what's called a stepped up in basis. If they were to sell them immediately for the same price as its fair market value, there's no tax. If they keep it 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years and appreciates in value, they have capital gains tax to pay. So,
I guess I was asking, because you were saying that it might be better instead of giving them one lump sum to give it over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking that if they got it in one lump and they're taxed, they might be taxed at different rates going forward.
it could be. You just got to look at it. And the one thing we don't know, we have no idea what taxes are going to be in the future. So it's guess.
Okay.
It's just guess. Whatever, what you ought to do is just whatever feels right.
Okay.
Whatever fits you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Carol. Back to you.
Okay, the only thing I would say in closing is thank you for coming. And as employees, Eddie is available to you. If you would like to meet with him, he's here once a month, on Thursdays always. But he is available to meet with you. You just need to contact me, 6794. And he is available at no charge to meet with you. Just let me know.
And I don't sell products, manage money, or draft documents.
Right.
Just a plan.
Right. He just plans, so he will not try to sell you anything.